Now, onto our talk with Brandan Schieppati. Known this guy a very long time. It's actually really great to catch up and kind of have someone who, comes from the same world, and kind of we have these references that go back to this underground independent hardcore scene. And, I just don't have that many people in my life, that I can make certain, make this particular band reference or talk about this stuff. Only a few of us really got to experience that firsthand. And, Brandan is just a really impressive guy. He seems like one of those people who pretty much will have success in whatever endeavor he pursues. He has a kind of formidable type of determination and will that doesn't seem like you could stop it even if you tried. So I really appreciate him coming on the show. I know how busy he is, and I imagine for a band like God Forbid, we probably shared a lot of fans, and we definitely come from the same world. So I know this is exactly the type of guests that the listeners of the show want to hear from. So without further preamble, here is my old friend, Brandan Schieppati. Right on, man. Thank you for being on the show.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me.
You're one of the I'd say the major gets, or like my big kind of master list of people that that's seriously like the reason why I started this show. Like, I think in many ways the concept behind the X-Man show almost started probably the day after Chimera broke up.
Yeah.
And I had just seen them like literally like a week before that. And then I wrote this article called "This Is the End," and kind of, it was very like my visceral, like immediate feelings, about what had kind of happened between God Forbid breaking up.
Were you feeling like you're witnessing like an end of an era?
Well, yeah, but it was like this kind of triumvirate because, like I said, we broke up 2013.
Yeah.
And when did Bleeding Through break up?
2013.
2013. And then Shadows Fall went on hiatus. I don't think they ever officially broke up.
Yeah. And
then Chimera, and it was like, to me, that was like, or I guess it wasn't triumvirate, it was a quadumvirate.
Yeah, quadumvirate.
No, but so I wrote that article, and to this day, it's still like the most viewed article I ever wrote from my website.
That's awesome.
But it touched a nerve, and it kind of, I didn't know it at the time, but it described kind of the philosophical mission statement behind the show, which is to figure out what happens to a generation of men and women involved in this scene when where I think, because there was so much of a relation between the group of bands we came up with and like the thrash kind of movement, right?
Yeah,
like
totally.
It felt like this correlation between, oh yeah, we're the coming up of Metallica and Testament and Overkill and Exodus. We felt this connection.
You could totally see it like that because, the late 80s, early 90s Bay Area movement of all those bands, and like you go to Texas and you grab a band like DRI that kind of had that like thrash kind of thing as well. But that time frame, it was kind of interesting because you could look back at that time frame and you started seeing Slayer videos on MTV and stuff like that for like Headbangers Ball. And you kind of saw like Exodus and, you throw Metallica and Megadeth in there, and just that whole scene was popping off a little bit more. You were seeing videos, you're seeing everything. And it was kind of like this, like, yeah, it was the thrash era, but it produced bands like Metallica and Megadeth and Anthrax and bands that kind of transcended that area, that moved on to another level. I've actually thought about this before, how in about the early 2000s was kind of like the second wave of that, that like what you were talking about. And here's the correlation between, you see like the thrash metal kind of started like underground, and then it had the bigger bands that like went past it. And that's when like metal started getting on like radio stations like KNAC in Southern California, MTV, and like just seeing videos, you know what I mean? It was like, it was kind of crazy. So I kind of feel like punk in the 90s is what the 90s was all about. It was all about like the pop punk era, you know, like Blink 182, stuff like that. And that kind of changed like the demographic on MTV as well and within pop culture. And it was only a matter of time before some sort of like metal swung back around. And what I noticed is that new metal was knocking on the door. You know what I mean? And that kind of
in a big way. You had huge bands.
You had huge new metal bands, exactly. Like so bands like, you know, like Korn and Coal Chamber and Slipknot. You see bands, exactly, bands that came through like around then. There was almost like this, that in a way it helped bands like Bleeding Through and God Forbid. Even though when like Slipknot was kind of coming through and Coal Chamber, I remember saw Slipknot on their first tour, and they opened up for Coal Chamber, and I remember I wasn't in Bleeding Through yet. I was playing guitar for 18 Vision still, but I remember watching Slipknot at the time, and I said to myself, dude, like this is gonna happen for these younger bands. Like this is, because here's this show that's fucking enormous. Here's this band that has breakdowns and is screaming into a microphone and has more of a metal influence, that I feel like it's gonna open some doors for like smaller bands.
No, I remember hearing it the first time I heard. I think I heard Spit It Out first, which I was like, but when I heard Sick, I was like, this sounds like a hardcore scene.
Yeah,
band.
totally. And the funny thing is about that. So I'm backtracking a little bit, but 2004 Ozfest is really the thing that broke it. That was like the second coming of like the thrash era metal, more traditional metal bands. Like the new metal stigma was done. Ozfest a couple years before that was all new metal bands. 2004 it actually turned into like metal / hardcore bands.
It was a revival of a more
underground metal movement, and that's what kind of the thrash metal thing was, because you know bands like Coal Chamber were signed like by a major label like that. You know what I mean? So, but it was kind of like a new wave of the underground metal. You know, and then there was bands that were from that broke off to transcend it. You have bands like, you know, Killswitch Engage and I guess Hatebreed you throw into that mix, and you throw Lamb of God in that mix, and you could, and for me, honestly, you could throw Avenged Seven. You know this. Yeah. You could throw Avenged Sevenfold in that mix. You know, both of our bands have toured with Avenged Sevenfold when they were trying to play in front of your fans. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. No, listen, we're gonna get into all this, but the reason why I made that relation was that I think the difference between the thrash era and our era is that there was the bubble was a lot bigger, right? So you could have a band like Anthrax, you know, and people don't remember, like there were lean years for Anthrax where they were not selling out venues and they were not selling records, but they had come off gold records, playing arenas.
I saw them play the Key Club in LA and it wasn't even sold out.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. But our bands, the peak for a lot of us was never that big. So when things kind of had a downturn, I think a lot of us did have to look in the mirror and figure out, all right, what the hell are we going to do?
Absolutely.
You know, so it's like this kind of this sobering realization that all of us were having around the same time. But that's, you know, but anyway, that's what I'm saying. In many ways, because of that, you're kind of on like the Mount Rushmore of some of the guests, you know.
I'm on the Mount Rushmore of the bands that never quite got there.
No, I'm saying the people
I'm just joking, man.
But the people that I think that represent what this show is kind of about.
Yeah,
you know,
cool.
because I think because you have certain people, right, who will leave X band and then they just kind of keep going on. They start a new band, they just keep going on. But you're a guy who, even though you're still doing music, you went in this whole other direction.
Yeah,
and that to me is almost just as fascinating. It's sometimes more, because I think one thing I've learned about myself, you know, even the fact that this show even exists, is the idea that I realize there's more out there besides just music.
You know, and kind of the reason why I kind of went in the different direction into the fitness industry is because it was like the second passion for me the whole way through, like playing music. And I kind of saw it being like this new underground movement. It was kind of weird. Like I saw it from an outside perspective and be like, I could help make this like cool. You know what I mean? Like, and I can make this more acceptable for people like me.
Yeah. And you also have, you know, you being a personality that has an audience and people you could reach to,
Totally.
you actually could
Yeah.
get to a market, so to speak, that perhaps wasn't being served or catered
Yeah.
to in the way that you could communicate.
And a huge thing of reason why I didn't like stay in music after, kind of decided to pump the brakes on Bleeding Through. I managed bands for a while in like the mid 2000s all the way through about 2010. And I actually had like some great bands like Let Live, All Shall Perish, For the Fallen Dreams, Lionheart, Straight from the Path, like real bands, you know what I mean? And
I didn't know that you managed.
And I was doing pretty well kind of finding these bands and helping these bands get going. And then eventually I was like, this is killing the rest of music for me, because now I'm on this side of it.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing the way that music actually really works, and I fucking hate it.
Yeah. Well,
And so it was weird for me. So when I decided that, okay, let's look into something else, what are you as passionate about? And I said, well, fitness is that thing I'm passionate about. And I decided to go to that. And a lot of it, I mean, honestly, a lot of it was, I reached a certain level with Bleeding Through I was very proud of with the band. And we reached levels that I didn't even think was possible. And it took everything out of me when it was around the time where I kind of had to like start thinking about life after. And so there's opportunities there to like do bands with other people. People were reaching out and saying, hey, if Bleeding Through is going to be done, like come sing with me in this new project. And so a lot of stuff that never even happened. But I literally had to say to people, I don't think this band's going to be as big as Bleeding Through. Not that I wouldn't do it because of that, but I don't have the fucking energy to grind like that again.
Yeah.
Like I just don't have that energy to go out there and make it a daily and hourly and minutely.
Well, it's all it's
type thing.
I think that one thing we can kind of relate to it being kind of similar in age, and also having a band start from that point of like nothingness, right?
Yeah.
Like where you're literally like, all right, this, and I guess in some respects, Bleeding Through had a leg up just being that you were in 18 Visions, who had a name, and you were coming from this scene that kind of had its own brand, I guess, associated with it. So, but even with that, you're still starting from scratch, and to see something that starts from nothing and all of a sudden it becomes an actual thing that people care about, and you're selling records and you're selling concert tickets, and all of a sudden people don't, when you're doing that in your mid 20s, it is everything.
Yeah.
It is everything else is kind of background noise.
Totally.
To what you have to do, and the level of commitment to just kind of put the blinders on, put your head down, and just go forward, and to have almost maybe not a blind faith, because I think in many ways, coming from the hardcore scene, at least where we were, like a big band to me was like Vision of Disorder.
Totally.
It was like they could draw 500 people.
Yeah.
Like it was like they're on Roadrunner Records,
Yeah.
and I assumed they were just like
That's the pinnacle.
living in it.
Yeah.
But the idea that was a band, or we had
And then your band gets to that level or above that level, and you're like, man, this is still tough.
Yeah, well, I had people say this to me, and when it actually happened, it became so clear. And they're like, people think, local bands, when you're coming up, that, oh, when you get a record deal, man, it's easy, man. You get a manager, you get everything's easy. Like, no, that's when the work starts.
Yeah.
Is essentially actually, or what I've noticed, the bigger the band is, the more work there is.
Yep.
The more press, the more you have to, all right, we're working with these designers to figure out these merchandise designs.
Yeah.
All right, we have to coordinate this marketing and all, it's like there's so much, especially if you are the
dude in the band.
Exactly.
I know you're kind of like the second manager, and that's one thing that like when Bleeding Through was at its biggest, I mean, that was a full-time job for me, even not on tour. Like just doing interviews and going over like merch ideas and stuff like that was,
and just logistics,
Yeah.
booking flights,
Yeah.
figuring out your tour budgets,
Yeah, dude.
Doing all that stuff. So I kind of want to talk about back in the day, like when we met. So
Yep.
I don't know if you remember when we met, but I do. And it
Mushroom Head.
Yep. So there was a tour. It was Mushroom Head, Lamb of God,
18 Visions.
and was 5.0.
That was
tour?
the band, yeah, 5.0.
5.0, right? So, and it was this kind of cool thing, because I think around that time, this was I think 2001 or 2002.
it was my last full tour with 18 Visions. I believe it was November 2001.
Yeah, something
like that.
And but it was this kind of cool thing, like back then when you were a quote unquote scene band.
Yeah.
Where like, you know, because things were so regional back then, like it really was like a blockade.
Yes.
Between contact and like seeing a band from California was like a rare occasion. I'm sure vice versa, seeing a band from the Northeast was like a special deal when a band would travel and do, you know, because back then a lot of times hardcore bands would literally just go to the West Coast and maybe do 4 or 5 shows and drive straight back.
Totally. You know? And, you know, the middle of America, there wasn't so many spots back then. You know what I mean? Like, I remember when Colorado, Denver first started having like shows, and that was like, wasn't until like 94, 95, you know, like it was slow getting to there. So it was hard to book that area. So yeah, you would only see certain bands at certain times.
Yeah. But the thing that was cool about that moment meeting you was that because even though we were separated by 3,000 miles physically, the fact that a band can make a little noise and then you meet someone, you have this kind of like mutual admiration society. Like, oh, what's up, man?
Yep.
And like, I know your band, you know my band, and you have this respect out the gate.
And then you have something in common right away too. So it's a little bit easier to like talk to people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So. But I thought, you know, it was like the first time I saw the band, and I just remember James did the Harley. The Harleys. Listen, you're shaking your head. I thought it was the coolest fucking thing.
It was pretty cool.
Ever, because here's the thing. You know, and this is, to me, the legacy of 18 Visions, and I could be wrong, you know, being that I wasn't exactly there for the inception or to see how the band grew organically in person. So this is kind of like outsider looking in, especially like, you know, essentially that was the point when 18 Visions kind of became a thing. And so just my perspective was that, you know, rock and roll swagger was not really, I don't say it wasn't allowed in the scene, but it certainly was not something that people embraced. Like,
oh, we fucking forced it, man.
You know, so I loved it because it was just so different.
Yeah.
And it also was kind of counterintuitive to the way the band sounded. Yep. Because the way the band sounded, the people that were probably really into the band were like the tough guys. Mm-hmm. So it's this weird dichotomy, you know.
It was like, super heavy and stuff, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It'd be like if, you know, like remember that picture of Slayer where they're wearing like makeup? It's almost it's almost like if Slayer would have kept wearing glam makeup, but sounded like Slayer.
Would have kept looking like Poison,
but sounded like Slayer. Yeah. You know, it was this weird thing, and then obviously after that, you guys kind of, you know, who coined the term Fashioncore?
That wasn't us.
Okay.
That was that's kind of interesting because that was kids from I believe I could be completely wrong, but I believe that a few kids from Long Island coined that.
Like a zine or like a journalist or something? Like
these kids that were friends with that band From Autumn to Ashes. Yeah. Coined it and started making like shirts and shit and selling them, and it was weird because then
did it just say Fashioncore?
It just said Fashioncore.
Okay.
And then everybody we come places and we go places and people would be like, "Oh, you're like I'm not into like Fashioncore though," and I'm like, "What the fuck is Fashioncore?" Oh, like you guys, what Fashioncore? Like, and I remember even when Bleeding Through started, people were like, "You guys are just another Fashioncore band." I'm like, "Have you seen my band? Like, we're ugly as fuck. Like, what do you mean we're Fashioncore?" Like, it was just like. It was interesting. But yeah, we didn't even coin that term.
Well, no, but...
And we kind of went with it a little bit because we're like, well, fuck it. If that's what... Fuck it. I mean, we are pretty fashionable. We do play hardcore. And sure, if everybody wants to put, like, you know, things together like that.
So you have to address a urban legend that spread to the East Coast. And it was, like, the lore of this Fashioncore band was that all the guys in 18 Visions are hairstylists when they're not in the band. This was is there any truth to this urban legend?
Yes, there is. Okay, so when there was a certain point when James is a hairstylist still, and that's like his day job, and he kills it, and he's very successful. He's really good. He was a stylist. Javier was our bass player at the time. He was a stylist. And at the time, I was in school to be a stylist. So 4 out of 5.
Listen.
Or 3 out of 5.
Maybe it should have been stylecore.
Stylecore.
Or haircore.
No, but we heard so much fucking weird shit. Like, we would go places and we heard the haircore. And what's funny is, like, the first time we ever, like, went to the East Coast, like, people, like you said, it was like kind of like, it didn't make sense. Like, here's this band that looked like fashionable, like for real. Like, we had our hair done. We were wearing like not fucking cargo pants. Like, we had like jeans on and like nice t-shirts and stuff. And we were playing this heavy fucking shit. And people clowned us for it at first. They're like, well, what's this? And like, it's because they just didn't know. And then next time we came through, every fucking motherfucker looked like that.
Yeah, so but I think that's the interesting thing about it is that it wasn't contrived.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you guys had this grand plan. It's like, we will do this and then it will create this.
No, that was really just us.
No, I know. That's exactly what I'm saying. And then, so I remember you were the first person I ever saw with a faux hawk. Right?
Yeah, man.
And to me, when you kind of take that kind of thing, what you guys were doing, hair-wise, and then even like really good tattoo work, like full sleeves, because a lot of hardcore people would have tattoos, but a lot of it would be shitty.
Yeah, shitty work.
You know, so even like having like nicer tattoos and like in a sense, like exactly what you said, like this thing that was started in this one area of the country, from a small, maybe 3 or 4 bands, that in a sense became the proto look for, I guess, the kind of the Warped Tour section of the hardcore scene, where it's like that, you know, that is just a de facto, like, oh, this is what a scene kid, quote unquote, looks like.
And like even the second wave through that was when, you know, even like when Bleeding Through started going to East Coast and we were wearing like fucking all black and makeup, and people were just like, fuck's this. And it was the same deal. It's like next time we came through, it was like everybody looked like that.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing was with Bleeding.
And I started doing the makeup thing like in 18 Visions, and then I'm like, well, fuck it, it's gonna carry over to Bleeding Through.
Well, that's it. But I think with Bleeding Through, it took on this new like goth aesthetic.
A total goth look, yeah.
And then, you know, kind of, you know, you guys would like rep, you know, the Misfits and Danzig, and kind of bring that world.
It's called Dude Goth.
Dude Goth.
Yeah. So it's like guys that look like gothic but watch football on Sundays.
Yeah, I'm saying it is kind of this the I don't know, to me it's like the precursor to all these cultural movements, whether it's you know, obviously even like working out wasn't necessarily fashionable, things like CrossFit and MMA, you know, and this kind of, and I what I imagine, you can kind of like tell me or not, that there is obviously something that has to do with the Southern California active lifestyle that is just natural to this area, whether that's, you know, working out or surfing or you know, volleyball. I don't know. You can tell me.
You know what it is? You know, it truly is kind of the land of competition. It's just a fast-paced, moving part of the world. And, you know, people think that California is like super laid back, but I mean, you live here now. It's not. This place isn't laid back at all. This place fucking busts their ass all day.
I think
and all night.
by comparison to the grind that is New York or Boston or Philadelphia, I think whatever it is, I think just having a little more space.
Yeah.
And having it be a little sunnier,
and
a little warmer, and having like I said, I think, you know, it's probably costs about the same to live here as it does live in New York or Boston, but the quality of life is just kind of like
a little bit bigger,
a little bit. You got a little more space, it's a little nicer, and that allows you to relax a little more.
It definitely is more relaxed, but
I know what you're saying. It is like, the way I look at it, LA is all about hustlers.
Totally. It's a hustle state.
And the people that persevere are the ones that do not get caught up in chilling. Because the thing is, you can get a kind of whatever decent middle class job and be comfortable, and it's cool, and just chill, and it's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're the type of person that says, well, I'm not, you know, I can basically do that anywhere. Yeah, I'm here to do something bigger things.
The opportunity is there.
Yeah, and that's kind of
like why here, you know, like in Huntington Beach where we are right now, where my gym is, there's the most gyms in the city compared to any other city in the world. For real. And this area, and I think it's why a lot of bands spawned from this area at once. Like, you know, you look at just like a core group of bands that grew up at the same time or in the same area, we're all friends. Atreyu, 18 Visions, Bleeding Through, Throwdown, Avenged Sevenfold, Thrice. Like, you look at all those bands and you're like, all those bands are pretty successful. I don't think without the other band, we wouldn't have done that. I think that we had like this, not like ill-willed competition, but there was friendly competition between all of our bands, whether we wanted to admit it or not. But I think that's what drove our bands to like try to succeed and really like go and do it. And when you're talking about like, we have the extra time to like work out or the more space, that was just part of it. Like, we all said, you know, we're going to try to outdo the next band.
Yeah, well, like, but I'm pretty sure Straight Edge had a lot to, you know, those things were correlated.
Oh, totally.
Because, you know, the way I look at it, if you are straight edge, especially on tour, where there's a lot of downtime.
Oh, dude, that's why I started.
You were able to basically utilize that time to put, you know, to something positive.
Yeah.
And it's something we got a guest.
That's Mick.
What's up, Dave?
What's going on? We met before, right?
I think so.
You look super familiar.
You guys have probably met.
Either we met or you look exactly like someone else.
I'm always hanging out with him.
Yeah.
Oh.
So yeah, there was a lot of downtime. It was funny. Here's the difference of like time. When I was on tour, like in you know, let's just say Warped Tour we did in 04, or we did Ozfest 04. Let's talk then. When I was working out on tour then, there was maybe like 4 other people working out and a bunch of people walking by with beer going like, yeah, fucking 12-ounce
I would work out with what's his name from Throwdown? Ben
Dussault.
But I was, you know, I was like not as ripped as you guys, or as like I'll say this, I actually started working out after Ozfest, because the girlfriend I met after that really got me into working out. So I didn't really know much about working out, and I think it's hard sometimes too. You're intimidated when people are in really good shape, and you're like, you know, you just feel kind of inferior unless they're in that, like, thing that was great about Ben though is he would show me things.
Totally. He was a good teacher.
Yeah. Like, you know, so it was.
So the crazy thing is like, so back then, you know, we did it and not many people were working out. And then fast forward to last year where my company went on Warped Tour to be like the tour trainers. And so we had a backstage, we called it the backstage battleground. And Razabo Fitness was backstage. We had our equipment. We did 3 sessions a day for groups, like group training stuff. And it was awesome, but it's crazy to see, like, back then, nobody was really into it. And now it's such a daily regiment for most bands that tour. Like, working out's definitely a part of it, which is really cool for me to see.
You got to see Travis. Travis from Darkest Hour.
He
looks like CGI. And but he'll work out anywhere. Like, there'll be like a 4x4 like thing, and he literally will buy weights.
Yeah.
There's a weight set for the European tour, and then just leave it there.
Yeah,
like
that's awesome.
That's how he'll work out, and it's like he's completely like just abs.
Yeah, he's
and
ripped.
It's looking crazy, and then just eat like McDonald's. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, we're working with different. Well, he was saying, it's like ectomorph.
He's an ectomorph.
Yeah.
So he could just eat whatever the fuck he wants. He's going to be lean as long as he kind of works out.
But he's not. He's ripped, but he's like bulky. It's not like he's like, you know, just like kind of all svelte.
He looks like the dude playing Superman when Superman's in his costume.
Yeah.
And you could see like he's fucking really just jacked, but still has like abs. When I was watching him play drums in LA, I was literally watching him like, he looks like Superman.
He actually does look a lot like that actor.
He does, dude. He does.
Now that you think about it, see, Travis, you know, you're wasting your time in a band when you can be in like Avengers.
Or you can just wear a cape when you play drums.
So I kind of want to go back a little bit. So what you are an X-Man also of 18 Visions. Mm-hmm. What kind of clued you into transitioning from 18 Visions into Bleeding Through?
I never wanted to be a singer, like, ever. That was like for sure. I've battled with bipolar since I was 14, and guitar helped me be able to deal with being around big groups of people because my guitar was my force field.
Yeah, you have something in front of you.
It was something in front of me. I could put myself in like this sort of like bubble and just fucking jam out, right? And so I'm like, I could do this music thing, which I want to do. Like, I love music and I want to play and I'm passionate about it. It's like, I think about it daily. It was my life. And so that was my one way of being in a band, was guitar. Let's see. I loved playing in 18 Visions because it was like my first band that I played in that was like a real band. But then it turned into more of like a like. I joined Throwdown during the time of playing in 18 Visions. I played guitar for Throwdown, and I liked that as well because it was fun, but it wasn't really my thing. I wasn't really like more like just like a basic or more basic hardcore. I liked more metal, and I liked more eclectic and more. I liked New Jersey sound. I liked Dead Guy, and I liked For the Love Of, and I liked those fucking bands.
Yeah,
and
more
I was like
evil
sounding chords and shit. And I never, like we were talking before we went on air, I never learned how to play guitar from anybody really. So I would experiment with chords just to be like, okay, this is kind of cool. This sounds fucking rad. So what transitioned me was, I know 18 Visions wanted to go more rock and roll, which I was okay with at first. But I had to fill in for a show for Throwdown in Southern California. And I'm like, fuck, I got to fill in singing for Throwdown. It was fun. It was like one of the most fun I've ever had in my life.
How did they know you could sing? You would just take the mic every now and again and do some shit?
Pretty much. So I did it, and because Keith had another show with Adamantium, and so I sang. And Scott Deneau saw the show and was like, dude, we're starting a band and you're going to sing. And I'm like, fuck no, man. I'll play guitar, but like, I don't want to sing. And he's like, dude, just try. And I'm like, okay. So he wrote some songs and we found some good players and we practiced a few times. And I remember like bringing a friend to practice, and he's like, dude, like, this is pretty fucking sick. Like, this sounds like a more like hardcore version of like Suffocation.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, it kind of does.
Was that before you had keyboards involved?
Yeah, so that was before it, and the songs were a little bit more. They were a little bit more Suffocation. I mean, I was totally into more metal stuff.
So it was almost like deathcore before deathcore.
It was total deathcore before deathcore because there wasn't keyboards. There was, but the way that Scott was riffing was very like, yeah. It was just really notey, like shit like that, which I'm like, that's fucking sick. And we played blast beats. And I remember like we wrote a couple songs. I'm like, people aren't gonna like this.
Was
like, there's
Derek
no fucking
playing
way.
drums?
No, we had Troy Bourne, who was the drummer for a band called Taken.
Okay, yeah.
Not Taken, Liam Neeson.
Ray Harkin's Taken.
Ray Harkin's Taken, not Liam Neeson's Taken. So, although if Liam Neeson sang for Taken, it might be kind of cool.
Listen, I don't have riffs,
but what I do
have is a particular set of skills. I can scream. I don't want to scream, but I will.
You will force me to scream. So we started playing. We got some good players, and we never played a show.
But you didn't write any riffs?
I didn't write riffs at first. I left, and which was awesome. I'm like, this is sick. I got to show up and like just write like lyrics. And I always wrote lyrics because it helped me deal with my depression and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, Showcase Theater called me because 18 Visions was going to play a show at Showcase with Martyr AD. It's the first time Martyr AD came to California.
Hard band.
Yeah, dude, that first show, oh my God. And they needed another opener. So the promoter was like, dude, like, what about your other band, Bleeding Through? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. So I called all the guys in Bleeding Through, and they're like, yes, let's do it. So
how many songs did you have at that point?
3.5.
What did you like? Covers? Or?
I'm not joking you, man.
We just played the whole set twice?
We decided to add another measure of a part, and I just freestyle, like, scream into a microphone.
Yeah.
And that was it. Cool, whatever. And I remember after that show, people were like, dude, like, do you have a demo? Do you have a CD? And, like, people were, like, into it, and they were, like, moshing and shit. And I'm like, this is kind of cool. So I was like, well, maybe we should, like, play more shows and, like, do a demo. So we did a demo, we played another show. People bought the fucking shit out of the demos. We played a third show at Chain Reaction opening for somebody, and I can't remember who. I think it was Phobia. Sold more demos. The fourth show, we headlined Chain, and it was sold out. And I'm like, that's fucking awesome. And people were singing the lyrics to the songs. I'm like, this is pretty fucking cool.
At this point, you had, what, 5 songs?
We literally had 5 songs. We played 5 songs, and we covered an Integrity song called, the song was No One, which was like 1.5 minutes long.
Wow.
And I just kind of remember being like, I need to work on myself being on stage in front of people singing, but I love this.
Yeah.
And like I said, like at the time I liked playing for 18 Visions and I liked playing for Throwdown. So I cut Throwdown because Keith decided not to sing in Throwdown anymore. And they actually asked me to sing for Throwdown. And then it was like, now I'm in a conundrum. Now it's like, I play guitar for 18 Visions, I sing for Bleeding Through, and I'm being asked to sing for Throwdown. And I decided no on that. Dave ultimately became the singer. And shortly after that, after doing a first tour with Bleeding Through, where we toured with Every Time I Die and Norma Jean, the first time they called themselves Norma Jean. Before
they were Ludacris before that?
Yeah.
That's going back.
That's awesome. So they were Ludacris, and they changed the name to Norma Jean, and we did that tour, and it, you know, the shows weren't that big, but we had a few shows where it was like 350 people, and I was like, this is fucking, and they knew our songs.
Where was that tour? It was like nationals?
Dude, we did 6.5 weeks in the States.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Maybe the shows weren't that big because y'all were playing like
we played Chrome on that tour. Yeah, that was the biggest show. There was 600, but that was Chrome.
Yeah.
In the early 2000s,
yeah, but
you could fart on a snare drum and draw 600.
No,
kids
it
of
was. Listen, I think that kind of line between Long Island and New Jersey.
It was the best.
Yeah, it was
the best.
Pretty much the best. You know, one of the best scenes in the country at the time. No, the first time I can't remember if the first time I saw you was when you guys played with Under Oath.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also at Chrome.
That was with Unearth.
In the little
Under Oath. It was Under Oath, us, and Unearth.
Oh, but so, I remember seeing you guys and being like, "Fuck, this is no," because it felt like a new sound.
Yeah,
like because I think everyone else was, you know, especially us and Unearth and Darkest Hour, we all had these clear Scandinavian influences. And then you guys, you know, bringing that black metal vibe, like it just, I don't remember any other bands. Like, didn't like old Under Oath have some black metal?
Old Under Oath had some black metal influence.
And what was that band, like Undying? I know there's some
You know what? You know, I will say this. The bands that really kind of, from the hardcore scene that had that crossover that really influenced Bleeding Through was Prayer for Cleansing.
Yeah, Prayer for Cleansing, that was the one too.
Undying.
Was that band in the Day of Our Lord or something?
No, Day of Suffering.
Day of Suffering, okay.
Which, my opinion, Day of Suffering was like, I could put that record on right now and I'll be like, this is fucking sick.
There were so many
They were
records.
all from North Carolina. It was all that whole North Carolina thing. So, on that tour that I was talking about, with Every Time I Die and Norma Jean, we cycle back around, we play Showcase Theater in Corona, and there was about 800 people there. And the place was like going mental for Bleeding Through. And the dudes in 18 Visions were there because I was still in 18 Visions. And we went out back and we had a band meeting. And this was the time when Mick Morris was playing bass for Bleeding Through as well. Because we're like, well, we're never going to tour at the same time, so whatever. And I remember the dudes in 18 Visions going, listen, dude, like, we want to go this direction. Shows have never been this big for us here. Like, this is fucking nuts. You got to go with it. And the same day, I was talking to Howard on the phone, Howard Jones on the phone, and he was like, dude, you need to quit 18 Visions. Like, you got to do Bleeding Through. And it was just kind of ironic that both people said that to me.
Was Howard like managing?
No, we were just friends. You know what I mean? Like, because when Blood Has Been Shed came here for the first time, they stayed at our house. We stayed really close. And interesting, well, God, I'm some like bing, bing, bing off stories.
It's all good.
That's the thing about. So I basically decided then and there, I'm going to put all my eggs in the Bleeding Through basket, and we're just going to go for it, you know. And
what year was that?
That was 2002.
Wow, that's amazing. I guess it's so funny. I feel like I saw you with 18 Visions basically a year before that, but like I felt like back then a year was like 5 years.
Totally.
Like so much would happen that in my mind would seem like all these events, and it would happen in this kind of small frame of time, and how much your kind of life would change. So I guess, and then the tour we did was God Forbid, Bleeding Through, Avenged Sevenfold.
Yeah. Shadows Fall.
No. So all right. So
we started with Shadows Fall and then it ended.
No, that's not what happened.
Okay.
So basically the tour. So this is kind of this infamous tour for at least for God Forbid's career, because we had done an entire touring cycle on Determination and did big tours, you know, and we felt like we had made an impact. At that point we had sold maybe like 20,000 records,
which back then was, for a band like from us, our genre was big.
And so we felt like, all right, we had this nice resume of touring built up. We had gone to all these markets, and then we did like our first like kind of headline run. And it was like 2.5 weeks, and then so that was the lineup. But then Shadows Fall came on to headline maybe 4 of the shows. But even with Shadows Fall, and this is like, I think it was this like spring 2002 or something like that. Every show was like 50 people,
maybe 50,
100 people.
No, I tell the story too. Tell the story too. I'm like, dude, that lineup. If you fast forward that lineup about 3 years, those shows are all
even
sold
1
out.
year. Even one year, like Shadows Fall blew up literally in 2003.
Right after that, yeah.
So, but it was really demoralizing for us because we felt we had done all this work, and literally Bleeding Through would be like outdrawing us.
We were just kind of like that mysterious band at the time too.
No, but it was this thing where it kind of like, you know, and then obviously you have the wrinkle of Avenged Sevenfold opening up, and they were a brand new band. Obviously, people didn't really know them. Yeah. And my whole memory of that, where I hear all these people talking about, yeah, man, Avenged Sevenfold used to be good. I'm like,
nobody liked them. I'm like, then.
I didn't think.
Where were you back then?
Well, to me, my whole thing was, they seemed like a band trying to be heavy.
Yeah.
And they didn't to me, they didn't sound good trying to be a metalcore band. They sounded good when he sang.
Totally.
But it was just interesting to see, because it's like all this kind of cross section of like, you know, like these point. I don't know. It's like almost like some butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Type of moment. But for us, it was like kind of demoralizing. And then, you know, even with us, in like a year after that, you know, things had kind of improved and kind of things were moving on. But obviously with Bleeding Through, there was this real trajectory, you know, for you guys. And then obviously the next time we toured together was Ozfest.
Yep.
And something you brought up before, the one thing I kind of noticed is about that kind of time was that I felt like around, you know, 2002, and that time I felt like me and you were pretty tight.
Yeah.
And then I felt like 2004, you were so like I felt distant.
Yeah, I was awful.
And
for real, I was fucking awful. And really, to be honest, like I talk about this even on my podcast, mentally I was in a really horrible state at the time. I hid my issues from my band, so like nobody knew what the fuck I was going through every day. And there was so much pressure on Bleeding Through at that time, from like 2004 through like 2008.
In what way?
I feel like we were always being pinned against Atreyu and Avenged Sevenfold.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people thought that we should have been right at that level. We were always on Atreyu's coattails, but Avenged was just like gone off to the races. And it was like...
That's so weird. That's so weird to me, because you guys are like an extreme band, and they're not extreme bands.
And that's the thing. And I always thought Bleeding Through was way heavier and almost part of like a different scene altogether at the time.
Yeah.
Even from Atreyu, like our bands commingle, but it's kind of like when we toured with Both My Valentine, it was just different worlds.
Yeah.
Even though you see similarities, you're like, dude, these people have never heard and these people have never heard. It's just fucked up. We might as well.
You mean that there was a difference between Atreyu and
yeah.
Both My Valentine?
No, and Bleeding Through.
Oh yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So
it's a different, like, people. I don't think people really. Here's what they do: is they can say, okay, they're from the same place.
Yeah.
Okay, they kind of play heavy music, but so there's this interesting thing. So Atreyu went to record with Eric Rachel at Tracks East in Jersey. A big part of that because they really liked Determination, the way that album sounded. And the interesting thing about the production of that album is it has really low gain, clean guitar sound.
Did you record on line sixes? Was that true?
It was. I don't actually. They're like so. It's hard to say.
We're going to splinter off on stories so bad.
No. I can tell you one album that line 6 is the actual like secret sauce. That was Constitution of Treason.
Okay.
On the reamp, we used it, but we used it in like 2001. That was what we were using live.
Yeah. So go back to Trey.
But anyway, so they went to record with Eric Rachel, and because they really liked that record, and so I think part of the reason why they came off in a more mainstream way is that if you listen to that first record, or maybe it's not their first record, the first Victory record, is that it has this really clean, kind of not, almost like a rock,
it's not aggressive
sound with this aggressive music. so it's very palatable.
Yeah.
You know, so and listen, I'm not saying I'm not trying to take credit for that.
No,
but
totally.
it is this kind of interesting line of events as to why they came off. So if you went to see them live, they sounded a lot heavier live than they did on that first record. And then I think in a way it kind of informed their sound to be like, hey, we can kind of be a this heavy band that's a little bit more of a gateway band, or something that's maybe going to be not as offensive. But here's the truth. If it's not for Bleeding Through, it's not for 18 Visions, for Poison the Well, there is no Atreyu. And everything kind of built on one thing, and that's just how it is. It's like the way I look at, like, if there's no Glassjaw, you don't get the Used having like a platinum
absolutely,
record, or like Taking Back Sunday, becoming like it, and it's just, and we kind of get upset that the original band didn't get as big as the band that capitalized off of their establishing a sound or a scene, but it's just the way it is. You can't really, there's no justice.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like everybody, the industry was basically trying to pin our bands against each other.
And you felt that.
I felt that, and at that time, it was such like a competition I didn't want to be involved with, and I feel like it was forced upon Bleeding Through, and it made me think about the stats of things too much versus enjoy the moment and take in that moment. Between like the years of like 2004, 2008, I just had like the fucking ultimate like tunnel vision,
sound scan,
like I was just in fucking determination mode all the time, and it sucked because people thought I was just like an asshole, and I'm not. I got so sucked in that I distanced people away from me because I felt if I let people close, and then like a time may come where certain decisions have to be made, I don't want to be like the bad guy. You know what I mean? And I just saw the industry, and I didn't like it the way it was going. And I remember like that time frame and just being so sucked in. And like I said, it wasn't anything personal to anybody. And I've apologized plenty of times to people, just being like, dude, for a big part of Bleeding Through, when we probably were the most successful, I was the most fucking miserable. Like I was miserable. Like we would do a sold out show at Chicago House of Blues, and then I'd get off stage, and the first text I would have would be from our manager going, what was the doors today? Fucking what'd you do in merch? Like what'd you do this? How, like what were your sound scans? It's like, fuck. How was the show, guys? Was it a good show? No, it was just numbers, stats, and it fucking sucked us in. It sucked all of us in. And we kind of were like a band that like we were so mission oriented. And I remember in 2008 we played a show in Manchester, and the sellout of the Academy 2 was like, let's just say 850. It was about 850. I remember before the show I asked for a pre-sale. It was like 840. Okay, 10 off from a sellout.
So it's gonna sell out.
But I knew that it had to say sellout, or we weren't going to be worth this next time we came here, and we wouldn't be respected to get this kind of money for this tour. I knew that's the way the industry was. And I remember being like bummed. And I remember Brian coming up to me and going like, if this is the way you're going to fucking do this, man, like I'm done. Like we need to remember why the fuck we're here in the beginning, and look how far we've come, and look at what we've done to get here, and think about the journey and all the sacrifice and everything we've done to get here. Fuck 10 extra people walking through the door to make yourself feel better. You need those 10 people to make yourself feel vindicated for doing what you fucking love to do, which is getting on that stage and sharing something with someone, like with the audience. He's like, I'll go on that. Remember when you used to say it could be 5 people, it could be 500 people. It doesn't matter. You need to believe that, and you need to fucking go and appreciate what you've done. And I remember just being like, that was such a sinking in moment for me, where I was like, yep, things are changing now for me. And it did. I remember after that show, I told our tour manager, said, I don't want to know pre-sales. I told our management, everybody that worked for my band, I don't care about numbers. I don't care what our sound scans were for that week. Stop sending me those fucking emails. I don't care. I want to play this music for the music. And I remember there was a lot of pressure on us at that time to follow up the truth. and everyone thought we were going to go follow the same way of like 18 Visions or Atreyu and get more mainstream and do a rock record. And that's what segued into Declaration.
That's my favorite record.
Mine too. Because I was like, we're going to go write this fucking record and we're going to do it like we just started this band today. And we want to fucking write a record that really represents who we are and how we feel at the time. And I remember that, you know, the record starts with like a 300 fucking quote and then it goes into straight up like black metal fucking blast beat. And I remember I remember playing it for friends and people that like worked for Bleeding Through for the first time, and the look on their faces when they're just like, it was like shock and then it was a smile. And it was like, this is Bleeding Through. Like, going the way of Atreyu and whatever would have just fucking killed your band, and that's not you.
Yeah, see, I was the exact opposite. I liked the record before The Truth, and I didn't like its Truth as much, and then I ran that and loved fucking Declaration.
Mick and I talk about The Truth all the time, and
it's got the best songs, though, dude.
It does have the best songs. It just wasn't...
It has the best album cover, for sure.
It just wasn't... and this is really nothing against Rob Caggiano, who you and I, you know as well. He's the man.
He is the man.
Certain circumstances fucked that record, and it just didn't get the love into it that would have made those songs huge.
Yeah. And
you hear those songs live and you're like, that's fucking they're so much better live than they are on that record. The record just doesn't encapsulate what Bleeding Through is, and that's why.
But is it still your biggest record, like sales?
This Is Love Is Murder is our biggest record.
Oh, okay, wow.
Yeah. The Truth is like always on its tail, but dude, This Is Love apparently still sells like 100 a week.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think for you guys, I'd almost put you in that same category as a band like Bury Your Dead, where it, like, in many ways the band has been vindicated by a band like Winds of Plague having so much success, in like the 2010s, and then Motionless in White and all these bands kind of. Yeah. Clearly there's a legacy that is not even distant. It's like right here, like almost like does something like that. Does that tell you, hey man, maybe we should have kept going? Or it's like, no, we like kind of put it down at the right time.
I feel like we ended what Bleeding Through was at that time at the right time.
Yeah.
It was just a time for us personally that we just couldn't do what we needed to do anymore. And really it was like, I think it was the right time. But I don't think there's any time that's better than the next like year to try to like, for a band, whether it's Bleeding Through or whatever, to kind of come up again with the fucking darkness, man. Like the pure darkness. You know what I'm saying though? Like there's a lot of bands that look a certain way but don't sound it, or sound a certain way but don't look it. It's about time for a band to just be like purely like evil again.
Well, I mean, I think in many ways, I think that's why bands like Code Orange and Nails are having so much success, is that even though it might be on a underground level to a certain degree, that thing that appeals, that kind of nihilistic rage that appeals to an 18-year-old frustrated kid, that kid's always going to be there.
Totally.
Whether that's coming from a personal place or kind of like a geopolitical thing that's kind of raining down on you, this kind of psychological warfare of just the times we live in. So I think that's always going to exist, and that's always, in a sense, what extreme music is there to represent. It's not, we've kind of, I think the biggest difference is like kind of going back to the early 2000s and the rise of bands like Atreyu and all that, and Avenged Sevenfold, and now we live in a world where these bands come out the gate and it's like they have their uniforms, they have a video, they have they have merch, they have, they kind of come out kind of understanding that there's a business apparatus that can be capitalized on. And now with bands like A Day to Remember, Bring the Horizon, that the ceiling is high. Like you can, if you do well in this realm, you can actually make a lot of money. You can.
It's one of these things too where I feel you know, there's always the argument of like, well, these bands now and blah 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 blah, and it's like they just have more resources.
Yeah.
They do. I mean, the ceiling is fucking set high now, dude.
Yeah. Well, it's just, but in a sense though, there's.
But take comfort in knowing that your band was part of that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Listen, I get it. Every time I go to a show, and I'm sure the same thing for you. The fact that even like, and this is the thing for me, because I think, you know, just being kind of the mouthpiece of the band and being kind of out there, you know, like I'll go to a show and like it'll be the guys who are on stage, I'll get recognized more than the band that's playing. It's weird to me that people like listen, with God forbid, I have no idea how many people love the band or influenced, but at least the people that do are very vocal and very appreciative. So it's this thing. I every time I'm always like, not saying I'm taken aback, but it's always something where I'm like, you know, I'm like, wow, this is kind of crazy that people still kind of give a shit. And, you know, people always ask, you know, especially me, because I'm out here, I'm on social media, I got the show. When are you doing a reunion? When you do this? It's like, I don't know about any of that, you know, just because I'm not really focused on it. But, you know, hopefully if something like that did happen, you know, it would be cool to have, you know, people give a shit, you know.
They will.
And the truth is, but the truth is, like, you're telling me about, you know, you guys are selling out this, like, we never had that peak, you know, like we never, you know, like, you know, we would do a big show in Jersey and there'd be 1,000 people there, you know, or like we could do like 500 people in London or something like that. Or, you know, randomly, like I said, we could sell out the showcase, you know, a thing here or there, but there was never that peak where
sold out tours and shit
like we like even though we had the record sales to a certain degree, not the huge, like we never cracked 100,000 like in the States on any record, but we would sell 60, 70, 70,000 records. But so in many ways it's always interesting to see like the bands who are on that kind of next rung of the ladder, that inadequacy never goes away, right? Like you're always looking at the next band.
That's it is, man. And it's like, and that's the thing, like I had to step back and like start living in the moment. And like when I talk to bands now that are like, you know, when I went on Warped Tour, it was funny because it was like every time I walked around, people were just like, hey, I got this question. And it was always like a deep question. It was like, you know, like what do I need to mentally think about like on a day-to-day basis out here, because I'm struggling just like put myself in it every day. And I'm just like, every day make a fucking memory, dude.
Yeah.
And like lock that in and try to like create memories every day, because this will end. I'm sorry to like burst your bubble, but
you mean someone who's in like a band?
I'm talking about people that are in bands, like backstage would like stop me and stuff. And I would tell them like, this will end one day. And whether you don't want to think about that yet or not, but it will. It's going to end for everybody. You know what I mean? Unless you're the fucking Rolling Stones, which there will never be again. It's just, it's going to end. So at the end of the day, if you don't have anything else other than like memories, it's worth it. And I think people are like taken back by it. They're like, oh, okay, well, I thought you meant like save my money or something like that. I'm like, no, create fucking memories and live with it. Because like I said, 2004 to 2008, I don't have memories. I was just in fuck everything up mode. That was it. And like, it sucked.
So you talk about these, in a sense, heights of the band that you couldn't appreciate. Was there an actual visible period where the band started to tail off?
You know what? We were really fortunate to never have like an extreme drop off. You know, our when we were at our peak, we were at a really solid level. I feel like we were a generation band to where there was a certain era of like around like 2003, 2007, 2008, where this music was at a heightened level. It was like it was like the golden days. You know what I mean? And so I think it kind of fell off for everybody. And so we kind of knew other bands where it was like numbers were getting smaller together. Like, you know, we would talk to like we would talk to Every Time I Die and As I Lay Dying, and we'd all talk about the same thing. Like, our shows are getting a little bit smaller, guys. Like, what's up? You know, we were very fortunate to always have solid shows.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, no matter where we played, we would always draw, you know, if it was a 500 cap room, we would draw 400. If it was like a 300 cap room, we'd draw 300. If it was a 1,000 cap room, we'd draw about 800. We were never really at like the high level of selling crazy shows out, but we always had a solid fan base.
That's good.
We
man.
never lost promoters' money, and that was huge to me.
So,
like,
so that wasn't a factor in you.
it wasn't in us bailing the band. It was really, I have this business opportunity to start a gym and start another career and start other businesses off it, and I knew what it was going to take. Fucking 14, 15-hour days of grinding. You know what I mean?
So how does that? What's the difference? And obviously there's the mental aspect of that. You know, you had this turning point where you started to kind of appreciate just the day to day and not get wrapped up into the numbers. Did you take that new kind of approach and appreciation into the
gym world?
Yeah.
I did, but fuck, man, it makes the music industry look like a cakewalk, man. Like for real. So
well, it's probably so. You know, by the time you got involved, like I said, these things are more popularized and they are more kind of pop culture, and the competition, I'm sure, is insane, right?
It is. I mean, I feel like I got in at a point where I established myself a little bit quicker and before a lot of other people did. So as far as my gym goes, it's like a fabric of the community now. You know what I mean? It's you know, we have a solid membership. It makes good money. The clothing company I did off of it was just a hobby that ended up making more money than the actual gym. Just called Rise Above Fitness Apparel.
Yeah.
So we just started doing that, and we made a shirt and it sold, and then we made a couple shirts and more sold, and it was just like this. Okay,
so
now
you said that's doing better than the gym?
It does pretty well, yeah.
That's awesome.
And we sell like everywhere. So I mean, and that was a good thing. One thing has made the other thing. Makes the other thing run, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like starting to do the clothing line, I learned that from the music industry. So I'm taking all these things that, how does a band get more exposure when they're not there? From the people wearing their shirts at other shows that they may have bought at your show. So I knew that, how am I going to get the name of my gym out here? I used to do like weekend boot camp things where I'd meet people from other gyms away and be like, hey, I have a decent social media following. How about I come up there on a Saturday and do like a boot camp for free for your members and anybody else that wants to come to your gym? I kind of treated it like a tour. I went to Australia and I did like a boot camp tour where I went to 8 different spots in Australia. I had a tour manager on the tour. Like, it was a tour, man. And I literally showed up at a gym instead of a venue, and people bought tickets to go work out with me and have me talk about fitness.
So, but are these is this kind of from the umbrella
it's transcended past the band. It first started with the band, where I would get like some people from the band that it definitely helped me. Yeah. But I mean, fuck, man. I'd say 90% of my actual clients, like that I personally trained, don't even know I was ever in a band.
Well, the thing that's interesting, I guess, especially when it comes to Instagram, is that, you know, this is as just someone just purely as a spectator, you see that there are like these kind of fitness celebrities, you know, and I don't know your ranking in the Instagram.
I'm like a D-list fitness celebrity.
No, but that kind of creating a following,
totally.
You know, where you know, and I think you kind of, even early on, I noticed just the way you would engage on social media. Like,
I saw the potential in the fitness industry, and that's why I literally said, I'm like, dude, I feel like there's a major need for someone like me. And so that's why I kind of introduced like our whole like our biggest selling t-shirt is heavy music, heavy lifting. Yeah. And it's really just like we're fusing the music community with fitness, and like you see people buying our shirts and wearing them. I see them at shows. Yeah. You know, it's crazy. And it's like,
well, it's a culture.
Yeah, totally. And that's what I was like, you know what, there is fitness celebrities, but none of them have their culture. And I said, okay, I'll try to boost my fitness celebrityism a little bit, but I definitely want it to become a culture, not just me. I want the whole thing to be like, to work, you know? Yeah. And so that's kind of the attitude I took with it, was I'm going to try to do this like I'm fucking starting a band. And it worked. Well, so that's really what happened with Bleeding Through, is like, I had to do it. And at the moment, the make or break moment for me was we had a whole tour. We had direct support for, I know people are like, oh my God. We had direct support for Parkway Drive in Australia.
It's a good tour.
Big tour. Okay. Bleeding Through was already pretty large in Australia. We went over there a ton and had a really good following. So it would have been, I mean, Parkway Drive alone sells out like 5,000 to 8,000 cap places, but it would have been really good for Bleeding Through. And I pulled out of the tour because I had an opportunity to open my own facility. And I was like, I can't pass this up. I would expect everybody in Bleeding Through at our age and where we are with the band in our career to take the same opportunity that I'm having right now. And
so you had like an outside investor?
I had a person that was willing to help me get my shit going.
And it was time sensitive?
It was very time sensitive. It was like, we need to meet this week.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, fuck, like that week I'm supposed to be on a plane to Australia. And it's
so it was booked and you had to cancel?
We had to cancel the tour, which bummed them out, and we feel really sorry about it. But it was a make or break moment for me in my life. And, shortly thereafter, Marta moved up to Northern California. She's now married to Phil from Machine Head.
Yep.
And
Much love to shout out to those guys.
She wanted to have kids, and they have a beautiful son now. And Derek, our drummer, lived far away at the time, and he has 2 kids. And
please tell me Derek lives in the Pacific Northwest. I just want to see him chopping down trees in a
He actually lives in a
flannel.
place called 29 Palms, where I think trees are actually outlawed.
See,
so he lives in like the
Derek.
desert, but he like breaks rocks with his bare hands. How about that?
I believe that. That sounds feasible.
And then Brian left the tour life a long time ago to pursue career and family, and Ryan's the one lifer in Bleeding Through, and Scott. But
because Ryan's in Devil,
Yeah, and Scott does his bands, and Scott's just a lifer. He just fucking this is it.
Yeah, it's that whole Godfather 3.
Yeah.
Saying I tried to get out and they pulled me back in.
And that's the thing. Like, so in 2013, where I'm like, dude, let's just do these tours. And what I told people on the tour every night was like, this may not be the end. We don't know, but we're playing Lubbock, Texas tonight. Because if this band ever does do another something, we'll probably never play Lubbock, Texas again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we're not going to be able to tour if we ever did it. And
it's destabilizing.
It was a way that I felt we had such a personal connection to a lot of people, and I think that's why our shows stayed consistent through our career. That it was important for us to do those tours to say goodbye to people, to fans. Like in places like Lubbock, where we would draw fucking 500 people in Lubbock, and it's like, what? Like, no one did that. And so we wanted to go to those places just to be like, we're here to say thank you for making this incredible dream happen for us. And this isn't bye forever, this is bye for now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we left it.
I think that's pretty awesome. Like, God forbid didn't get a chance to kind of put a bow on anything.
Yeah.
It was very abrupt and very there's certainly no emotional resolution.
Yeah.
And maybe that'll be rectified at some point, but that's really great to hear. I also feel like there's this thing with hardcore scene bands that they never really break up. It's
they don't.
There's always a benefit show.
And that's the thing. We actually got back together a year later to do a benefit show or 2 years later to do a benefit show for Ghost Inside. And it's like, yeah. And we played that show, and I remember like dudes that were at the show and that worked for the band for years, and even us afterwards. And I'm just like, dude, we were fucking awesome. Like literally, I'm like, we were fucking good, like straight up good. And it felt so good. It really did. And I remember like just being like, we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, let's talk in a year. So
you got it in your back pocket if you ever want to. Well, so, but I don't want to talk your ear off too much. Yep. But before I go, I just want to talk about 2 things. One, you have a podcast.
I do.
All right. So what's your podcast called?
It's called Negatively Positive. And it started off as just Brandan Schieppati's podcast, but I mean honestly, like my name is such a mouthful. So Negatively Positive, and it's really. I call it Negatively Positive because that's really how I am.
Yeah.
I'm like the most positive, like piss and vinegar person on the planet. That's kind of how I feel like Bleeding Through was, like a negative band with a solid, good ending. But I talk about a lot of fitness, and a lot of people ask me like fitness questions, and
But you have guests, or it's just
I
you?
do have guests once in a while. I like to get fitness and music people because I talk about both a lot, and I talk about lifestyle and mental health and stuff like that, and what people can do if they're struggling with something. And really, the shows are dictated by questions by people, though. Mm-hmm. So I'll ask, like, drop me some questions in my comments, and I'll get to as many as I can. And because I used to do like Q&As on Reddit all the time, and I decided to just do the podcast. And I've interviewed some cool people, man, but lately I've just been going solo with it.
Yeah.
I've just been going on these like 50-minute rants.
I just did my first Q&A.
Sometimes it's good for your soul to just talk shit in a room by yourself.
Well, the funny thing is, I think that's, remember, that's a skill. Not everyone, some people like just don't feel comfortable doing that. And I've, with my podcast, I'll have a discussion like this, but then I'll also have kind of a preamble where I'll kind of talk about what's going on. And depending on what's going on, I've been getting a little more out there, letting the tape run a little bit more, and just kind of go for it. But it is it's a very weird thing to kind of talk to yourself in a room. It
is. That's why I kind of do like the questions thing. But it's the whole reason another reason why I started even doing podcasts is because I'm a weirdo and I listen to like AM sports radio.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a fucking huge, just everything jock. But I would love to have my own sports show. Like I would absolutely love it because I'm knowledgeable enough and I do enough research, and I love when people ask sports questions and I think it takes them back a little bit when they do, because I'll give you like a 10-minute answer on like a short question if it has to do with sports.
Are you a general sports, or you have your teams?
I mean, I have my teams, but I pay attention enough to baseball and football to know a lot.
Well, get on it, man. Listen, I ran into a God forbid fan on Twitter who's actually the Minnesota Timberwolves ESPN beat guy.
Oh, nice.
So I got to go on their podcast and talk NBA, and I have a couple of my good friends that we'd like to just do like an NBA podcast at some point if we can get
that'd be cool.
Benny from at Gaslight Anthem to get his mic working. But no, man, listen, man, here's what I've noticed. Just like you with working out and turning that into a career, is just follow your passions.
Totally.
And me, and this is, especially before the podcast, when it came to writing, I would just write about, at a certain point, I was writing about music. And then Metal Sucks like, hey, I was like, hey, you guys want someone to write about the NBA? So I started writing about that. Yeah. Then I started my own blog, and I do something about race, or then I do something about politics or whatever. And it's just like, if it's in you and you want to express yourself, do it. Don't who gives a damn? And one last thing before I let you go. So you also have a new-ish band, the Iron Sun.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I was listening to it last night, and I thought it was going to be like, for some reason I was expecting like a more straightforward hardcore band, but it's not that much different stylistically than Bleeding Through.
I think it carries a little bit more of like a I'm really mad vibe.
I've never heard you not be mad. I'm still waiting for that.
Yeah, I feel like it's the vibe where it's different. I kind of just feel like it's someone kind of brought it up in a way that I've never heard before. Bleeding Through is more like a romantic band.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think about romantic. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? But then I'm thinking about it, and I'm all, we sing like, it's like love songs and shit. And the Iron Sun's just about like people I don't like.
Yeah.
So
it's hard.
It's hard for sure. And I really did it. I actually did it with Mick, who's sitting right over here. And I really just did it to fucking do music.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, fuck, I
still
have
got
to
that
do something.
Yeah.
And I have to see like that I could still do this. And so we do that. We played some shows, and we played our first headliner, and it went really well. Like there was a lot of fucking people, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Like
people still care.
People care. This is awesome for a band that's just like occasionally plays, and we self-released the record, and it sold pretty well for the limited area you can buy the record.
Yeah.
But you can get it on iTunes, so fuck, if you haven't heard it, go buy it, or honestly just there's Apple Music and Spotify, and however you listen to it.
All right, so how can we're gonna wrap this up. So how can people find you online if they want to get into any of your new music? Or
if you really want to know,
Rise
like,
Above Fitness?
if you want to kind of wormhole, the best place to start is probably my Instagram, just at Brandan Schieppati. So you just look up the last name, but it's BrandanSchieppati.
Yeah.
So you could look that up, and or you could Google bleeding through. But really, because
Rise Above Fitness.
There's also at Rise Above Fitness, and you can kind of wormhole to all my other shit through there. Because on my personal one, I promote all of it.
Right on. Well,
Yeah,
man, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Man.
Appreciate
it's been
it.
awesome.